welcome back to Food Prep Guide. We're out in the garden today, specifically at the garlic bed, and I have made the decision to go ahead and pull my garlic. So today's video is going to be all about harvesting garlic and prepping it for preservation, and then actually we'll go inside and actually preserve it together. So I am doing things differently this year. In the past, I have done what is probably the most popular thing to do with garlic, and that is to dry it and cure it. And then once it's properly cured and dried, string it and hang it in my pantry. But what I have found is that time and time again, when I am cooking meals, I always tend to go for the already minced garlic in my refrigerator. That minced garlic that's sitting in water, it's already chopped up for me. I tend to never really choose to go to my back pantry and get a clove and peel it and chop it and mince it and then cook with it. I always go for that ready-made stuff in the refrigerator. So this year I thought, why am I continuing to do this when I always go for the already prepped garlic? So I'm just going to go ahead and prep the garlic. I'm going to mince it and then we're going to dry it together. I'm going to freeze dry it. This works as well in the dehydrator as well. One year when I was trying to figure out if I wanted to use dried garlic, I did dehydrate it in my Excalibur dehydrator and it worked fantastic. I'm choosing the freeze dryer this year because it will rehydrate almost instantly, whereas it takes a few minutes to rehydrate from using a regular dehydrator. And since I have a freeze dryer, I will just go ahead and have that instant rehydration. So that's what I'm going to choose to do today. Before we get into harvesting the garlic, I want to talk about a mistake that I made and a lesson that I have learned this year. So we brought you along in a recent video on how to get bigger garlic, and it is one of the factors of that is fertilizing it at a very specific time in early spring with nitrogen. Now, I have been doing this for years. I prep my garlic in the spring in two different time frames. One is early spring, I feed it with nitrogen. Nitrogen is responsible for creating those green leaves. The more leaves you have on your garlic, the more wrappers you have around your garlic cloves. And if you're going to be drying and curing and storing long term that way, you want as many wrappers as possible to preserve that garlic for you. The second thing that I do is in late spring, right around that time that's going to start bulbing, I feed the garlic bed with phosphorus. Usually that's going to be in the form of bone meal. And I usually do that around early to mid-May. Now this year, I did what I always did. I went by the calendar and I fertilized with nitrogen in early April. Here's the problem and the mistake that I made. I allowed the calendar to dictate my actions instead of what the plants were telling me. I now know that I need to become a student of my garlic plants and not allow the calendar to dictate when I fertilize. So I remember, and in fact, I think I stated it on the video about how much further along the garlic was this year than normal. And I remember hesitating and thinking, man, it really seems like it's past the point of needing nitrogen. But it was the date that I have always fertilized my garlic on with nitrogen. I've done it for years, had great results for years, so I did it anyway. And what I should have done was looked at the garlic and said, you know what? We are already past the nitrogen needing stage. I should have noticed that it was already getting closer to that bulbing stage. And so this year in particular, even though all the other years have been different and I have fertilized it differently, this year, I should have noticed that we are already at the point where it is bulbing. I should have skipped the early spring nitrogen feeding and moved straight to the late spring phosphorus feeding. As a result of feeding with nitrogen too late in the schedule, it wasn't too late calendar-wise. Calendar said I was right on time, but the plants were telling me different. And as a result, I am dealing with splitting in my garlic heads. And I want to show you. I'm going to go ahead and pull this one right here. Like I said, I'm harvesting today, so it's okay for me to go ahead and pull this. I want to show you what's happening with the garlic. So this is way too many leaves. Way too many leaves, and this is what happens when you fertilize with nitrogen at the wrong time. Whether it's according to the calendar or according to what the plant is telling you, which is the lesson I have learned this year, painfully so. So here you see that it is producing way more leaves than it should, and as a result, it is splitting. The garlic is splitting in multiple areas. Garlic shouldn't be doing that. It should have a single stem that all the cloves should come together and form a single stem, and then that single stem should shoot up and form multiple leaves, but not this many leaves. It shouldn't be splitting like this. So this is what I'm dealing with. as a result of not reading the plants and strictly going by the calendar. So in the future, I will know to just do what my plants are telling me, regardless of what the date on the calendar says. So according to the calendar, I shouldn't be harvesting right now. I should be harvesting about a month from now, in late June, early July. It is the end of May, so it's not even June yet. But my plants are telling me that they are ready. Now, they could go a little bit longer. The way that you know that garlic is ready to harvest is when the bottom third leaves die back, brown and die back. So I hope you can kind of see, well, I'll just pull this one that I've already pulled, and you can see that many of the bottom leaves are now brown and are dying back. Here's another one up here. The tips are, you know, really brown, so you don't want to wait until the entire, well, some people do. Some people wait until the entire thing is brown and fallen over. I usually pull it right when it's about the bottom third is brown and falling over. I don't know, that's just what I've always done, and I've always had decent results with it. So these are actually not as brown as I would normally be harvesting them at, but here's why I'm going ahead and harvesting them now. Number one, I'm doing it differently. I'm preserving it differently this year. I'm not necessarily concerned with multiple layers of wrappers around the garlic cloves. I'm not necessarily concerned with it being super duper dry because I'm not curing it this year. I'm going ahead and taking it straight into my house and mincing it and freeze drying it today. So I'm not as concerned about forming wrappers. Number two reason is about 30% of this bed is splitting, which, like I said, like I just showed you. Now, that means 70% is doing fine, is doing the normal garlic route production. It's not splitting and all that, but 30% is splitting, and it's only going to continue to get worse if I don't go ahead and harvest it, especially considering our weather patterns, which we have a lot of rain coming in. We can't control the weather, right? But we can control when we harvest. Ideally, you don't want a ton of rain right at the end of harvesting. In fact, when I go to fertilize my late spring with phosphorus, at that point I stop watering. I let the rain do what it's going to do. I can't stop it, but I stop watering my garlic when I do my normal late spring phosphorus feeding, because like I said, you don't want a whole bunch of water hitting your garlic right at the end of harvest, or right at the end of the season when you're ready to harvest. So because not only is it splitting, but I have a lot of rain in my forecast. We had a huge storm come through last night, and I wish I had gotten out here yesterday, but I didn't. It is what it is, so we're just going to go ahead and pull it today before all those other storms come in this coming week. So that was my mistake that I made, and the lesson that I learned, that don't go strictly by the calendar. I have got to be dictated by my plants, not the date on the calendar. Okay, let's get harvesting, and then we'll prep it for harvest, and then we'll bring you inside and actually do the mincing and freeze drying process. If you would like help planning a productive garden, scroll down to the description box of this video and click this link for a free garden printable. We calculated quantities for a year's supply of the most common garden vegetables and organized them into a neat chart to help you plan. We'll send it straight to your inbox. If you're new here, we invite you to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming tutorials on gardening and food preservation, food storage, and more. Okay, so here is all the garlic. I think I might end up needing a bigger bowl, but we'll see. Now, just a note that if you are going to be drying and curing garlic as what is probably the most common or usual way, you do not want to spray it off. You want to let it stay as dry as possible. You'll just use your fingers to wipe off as much of the dirt as possible. Wiggle your fingers through all these little strings, get as much dirt off as possible, and then move on with the curing process. Like I said, I'm not doing that this year, so I'm going to give all of these a good rinse. I'm going to trim off everything up to about the bulb, trim off the hairs, and get it all cleaned up and ready to take inside. This is basically what I'm trying to get all the garlic, the point that I'm trying to get it all to. Just nice and clean, ready to go inside and mince up. Here's a perfect example of what is going on underground whenever you see splitting of the stalk above ground. You can see how all of these cloves are separating and they're getting bigger. They're really nice sized cloves, but instead of remaining tight together, they're just coming apart. Now for my use case this year, I'm just going in and preserving immediately, so this is no problem at all. This is perfectly usable garlic. And I'm actually really happy with the size of the cloves. But if you're going to be preserving garlic the traditional route of drying and curing and stringing, this would not work. So if you do ever have a splitting garlic head, just go ahead and put this just to the side and stick it in your fridge and use it first, or dehydrate it. But you wouldn't want to string a garlic bulb like this. Okay, y'all. Here's our harvest. It's a pretty big bowl, and I am happy with that. This is grocery store garlic, by the way, and I paid about $5 or $6 for it. I think that's a pretty good return on investment, and I'm very happy with it. I think this is a good example that gardening doesn't have to be perfect. You can make mistakes and still get rewarded for your labor and still enjoy a fantastic harvest. This is ready to go inside, and we'll mince it up and get it dried. Okay, we ended up with 9 pints of this freeze-dried garlic and 1/2 pint. I decided at the last minute that I do want to go ahead and have my working jar, like the jar that I'm constantly using and working from, to be in a 1/2 pint, because I want the vast majority of the garlic to remain vacuum sealed. So all of these jars are vacuum sealed. You saw on the video me using my electric vacuum sealer. Whenever I'm doing a large volume of jars at once, I go ahead and use that thing because it's a lot easier on my arm versus using the brake bleeder pump. Y'all know I love that. But that thing is really an arm saver and a muscle saver and a time saver when I'm having to do a bunch of jars. So I will link that electric vacuum sealer mason jar down in the description box below. But this will be the one that I am working through. It will remain in my cabinet, and all of these will be stored in a dark place and remained vacuum sealed. That is one of the big differences when storing dehydrated foods versus freeze-dried foods, is that freeze-dried foods really need to remain in a vacuum sealed, oxygen-free environment. They can rehydrate a lot faster and easier than dehydrated foods, even just residual moisture in the air. And that's one reason we want to keep it in a as completely oxygen-free environment as we can get. So I want all of these to stay vacuum sealed. But I am pretty confident that this will last a year. Every year I've had to expand my garlic area because every year we have run out before the next season of harvest, or before the next harvest season comes. So I am very hopeful that this is going to be good because, like I said, 9 plus 1, so that's almost a pint jar per month, and I don't think we go through a pint jar of minced garlic per month, keeping in mind that we still have garlic powder. I still stock garlic powder, and I use garlic powder a lot as well. If I do run out of the garlic powder, eventually I want to get to the point where I'm not buying garlic powder and I have enough for my minced garlic and the powdered garlic. That's another awesome thing about freeze drying, is that I can pulse this through my food processor or blender, grinder, like a coffee grinder, anything like that, and it will turn into a powder within seconds. So I can very easily turn this minced garlic into powdered garlic powder if I want to. But we'll see. I have garlic powder on hand, and then that's all the garlic I have. And we will see if that gives us a year's supply. I would love to be able to continue growing my garlic in that same space that I have currently. It's just a really nice setup. It was very easy for me to maintain, and it would be really nice if I can produce a year's supply in that footprint. We'll see. Yeah, we'll see. Okay, hope y'all enjoyed that video, and we will see you next time. Bye.